Welcome everyone. This is Chet Binning recording live on August 21st, 2025. This will be part 2 of our in-depth look at anemia and the symptoms and what you can do about it. And this is for you if you've said, I'm doing everything right and I still have problems. Let's first revisit the common symptoms of anemia. We went over these in part 1, so if you haven't watched that yet, please do so. Part 2 will make a lot more sense. Feeling tired, fatigued, or weak, shortness of breath, coldness in hands and feet, poor circulation, rapid or irregular heartbeat, dizziness, or lightheadedness. Importantly, in part 1, we discussed how these symptoms are an indicator. They're not meaningless. They're not normal side effects of aging. It is the body trying to tell us something. There is an underlying physiological and biochemical reason to explain these symptoms. And we went over all of this in part 1. And ultimately, it has to do with our red blood cells, so delivery of blood and oxygen to muscles, heart, brain, etc., which causes these symptoms. And this can be explained by insufficient hemoglobin, which is the protein at the center of your red blood cells, which is actually what is responsible for carrying oxygen throughout your body. So basically, blood carries oxygen throughout your body, but it's hemoglobin that is responsible for actually grabbing onto that oxygen and carrying it. Now in part 2, we're going to do some troubleshooting. So again, if you or a client of yours has said, I'm doing everything right, as in I'm making sure I consume an abundance of iron, heme iron in particular, which again, we talked about in part 1, but they still have problems. So it is very important to emphasize that iron does not work alone. For various reasons, whenever we talk about anemia, we always immediately discuss iron. It always happens hand in hand. So we miss the fact that iron does not work alone. And so let's just refresh and introduce where hemoglobin actually comes from. So where does it come from? How is it made? Well, hemoglobin, which remembers the protein at the center of red blood cells, which carries oxygen, is comprised of heme plus globins. Okay, how do we make these? Well, heme requires the micronutrients glycine, B6, zinc, iron. So of course iron, which is why it's always discussed, as well as vitamin C and copper. So quite clearly, we need a lot more than just iron. Iron is the most well-known. It is absolutely critical. It's commonly deficient. But we can't forget about these other cofactors that are also required to make hemoglobin, specifically the heme portion of hemoglobin. Now, the other part of hemoglobin, globin, is simply made from protein. So we need protein and amino acids to make globin, and we can break that down a little bit more, but we really just want to simplify things for now. So that is hemoglobin, but once hemoglobin is made, it has to be incorporated into our red blood cells, because hemoglobin is made in red bone marrow, inside a tissue inside of our bones. But the production doesn't end there. It has to leave red bone marrow and then be incorporated or added to our red blood cells in order to have that final product. And the point here is that this process of taking that hemoglobin and adding it to our red blood cells, there's other required cofactors here, like B vitamins, and several hormones are also important here, such as thyroid. Insulin affects this. Testosterone affects this as well. Testosterone you've probably heard of, whether you're aware of it or not. We know that it's abused, especially in endurance sports, for instance, cycling, Tour de France. And this is because testosterone will actually increase EPO, erythropoietin, which basically tells your body to make more red blood cells. Of course, sometimes these cyclists will also take EPO in addition to testosterone. But once you start to understand some of the real world application of this, it makes a lot of sense. It's easier to remember. That's the main thing. Easier to remember and understand. So, a quick summary. Heme/hemoglobin requires not only iron, it also requires glycine, B6, zinc, protein, enough protein, that is, vitamin C, and copper. Now, there's some other cofactors, but these are the main ones. And then red blood cell production and function. So in other words, getting that hemoglobin into your red blood cells, and then your red blood cells doing the job that you want them to do optimally. So actually delivering oxygen throughout your body so that you don't experience these symptoms and you don't experience these health risks, which we also discussed in part 1. And this requires several B vitamins, including B1, B2, B9, B12. And then, like I mentioned, factors like insulin resistance, differences in levels of testosterone, EPO, which your body does also make naturally, inflammation, and thyroid all affect this. But today we're going to focus on the cofactors because these are the levers that people can pull themselves. You can pull yourself primarily with diet and supplementation. So I want to give you the tools to be able to make meaningful changes to your health, and that's what we're focusing on today. It gets a little bit into the weeds when we start talking about the effects of the hormones. We'll still do that, but let's start with not the basics, but the intermediate stuff before we get to the advanced stuff. So again, remember, what is the body telling us? What are these symptoms indicating? They're telling us that we have impairments to delivery of oxygen throughout the body. Now, if you're saying this all sounds way too complicated, hopefully you're not saying that, but some might be, and that's totally fair. It can be complicated. But I'm going to show you how you can really simplify this. And as the saying goes, let's reach for the low-hanging fruit first. There's so many things that we can do in our daily life that are meaningful, impactful, that we should and we have to start here before we move on to the more complex stuff. And it really just comes down to diet. Making sure you are getting all of these micronutrients and macronutrients, protein, in your diet. And so here's some really simple tips that I think anyone can do. And this will make a meaningful impact if you are not already doing this. So glycine, where can we get glycine? Well, glycine is an amino acid that it's really difficult to get from the typical modern diet, because it's not found in most common protein sources. As in, it's not found in meaningful amounts anyways, in eggs, chicken breasts, ground beef, rice or quinoa. I mean, you name it, you are not getting enough glycine from these protein staples. Where can we get it? Well, we can get it from collagen or foods that are rich in collagen, such as bone broth, such as the collagenous tissue from animals. So things like things like drumsticks, for example, or making stews and soups from it's all the nasty foods, right? That's it's what some people actually call them, is the nasty foods that usually nowadays, or at least in our culture here in North America, we throw them away or we give them to the dog. Whereas in the past, and this is where it's always interesting to look at history and culture and the evidence it provides, we didn't waste anything. We would eat the muscle meat, eat some of the organs like liver, and then we would use the collagenous bits, the chicken feet, the fish head, the skins, like I said, any connective tissue, ligaments, cartilage, all of that would get thrown into a broth or a stew or a soup. And then as you cook that, you would obtain an abundance of glycine, this amino acid that is, not only is it critical for building your connective tissue, so healthy joints, skin, hair, nails, tendons, ligaments, etc., but it's also critical for, as you can see, production of hemoglobin. In other words, addressing anemia if that is an issue. So of course you can get this from food. You can also get this from supplemental glycine. And you can buy just plain old glycine, very cheap, very affordable, actually has a naturally sweet taste to it, so it is easy to consume. And you can just add this to your rotation. Glycine has a ton of other benefits. Sometime I think I'll do probably a multi-part series on glycine and collagen in general, because there's a lot here. But for now, just be aware, glycine, critical for hemoglobin and tough to get from diet. How about the B vitamins? B1, B2, B6, B9, B12. So we need all of these. And we need these for the proper production of red blood cells. So assuming we've made hemoglobin, we then need these B vitamins to complete the process, to complete production of that red blood cell. Where can we get these? Things like organ meats, animal protein, or high quality B complex. Again, so interesting that we used to eat more of these foods and other cultures still continue to eat an abundance of these. Zinc. Well, we can get zinc from oysters, also high in animal foods, especially high protein animal foods. Now, if you're supplementing, make sure that your zinc also contains copper. This is important. These two micronutrients compete for absorption, meaning that if you're supplementing a bunch of zinc without copper, you will deplete your copper. That's not a good thing at all. You do not want to deplete your copper. And so a good high quality zinc supplement will also contain copper. Copper is a really interesting one, which I will probably get into in the advanced presentations, because copper deficiency can actually present the same as iron deficiency. Because when you are absorbing iron, your body tries really, really hard to encapsulate iron when it's absorbed, because it's very reactive. It can't be left hanging around on its own throughout the body, because it causes a lot of damage. And so it has to be continually converted back and forth between different forms, and even enclosed or enwrapped or encapsulated, however you want to think of this, as it's transported throughout the body, so that iron is not in contact reacting with other parts of the body. Anyways, copper comes in, and it is needed to actually do those or to perform those constant conversions back and forth between different forms of iron. In other words, you need copper to properly absorb iron. And so if someone is appearing to be low in iron, but you're doing all the proper things to restore iron, it's just not working, sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper and you'll find that copper is an issue. So this is, you can go deep on this stuff, right? It gets pretty advanced, but this is the foundation stuff. We want to make sure of this stuff first before moving on to that more advanced stuff. But I just wanted to give you that example. Heme iron. Yep, we talked a lot about that one already. Vitamin A is also important. Vitamin A is important for iron metabolism. And you can get that from egg yolks, cod liver oil. Remember, part 1 used to be included in the Canada Food Guide in about the 1940s. Interesting stuff. Also rich in butter. I mean, that's interesting too, right? We were told for a long time to avoid butter. Protein and amino acids, you need enough of these for the globin. And specifically, a good target for most people is a minimum of 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. And here it is, just interesting historical and cultural anecdote. Liver and onions, yes, we used to feel this way about them. The old Canada Food Guide from 1944 said basically to eat lots of meat, eat lots of cheese, and then eat liver at least 3 times a week. Or pardon me, liver frequently. Eat liver frequently, right there. And then at the bottom, fish liver oil. A rich source of vitamin A, vitamin D, also has some good omega-3 fatty acids in it. Broths, soups, best way to get dietary collagen as well as glycine, gelatin as well. So just think of these as all wrapped up in the same package. We need all of these. And then sometimes supplements are incredibly valuable, right? Again, this is something that we'll talk more about in the future. So if, for example, you need more B vitamins, which I will show you what to look for on your blood work in order to identify what your issue might be. But as an example, if this is you need more B vitamins, then you want to use a high quality B complex, because that's another issue too, right? Is if you're going to use supplements, now you have to find a good high quality one. And we'll get into that as well. So I'm actually going to leave it there. Originally, I was going to present a couple case studies to give you some ideas about how to identify what the issue might be. Again, you can do this by looking at blood work. For instance, how do you know if you need B vitamins, or how do you know if you need iron, or how do you know if you need glycine? But I'm going to save this for the next presentation, because I think that's more than enough as is to take the next step, if you will. So you're already doing all the right things, or so you thought, or so your client thought, and now we can start to make some additional changes. And these are more than enough to get you there. So that's all for now. Remember, if you have any questions, comments, please don't hesitate to comment on this video, or you can reach out to me. Still the best platform for now anyways. I'll let you know when that changes, is Instagram. Thank you for tuning in.